We know the transfer portal is a really big thing in college football. And one of the biggest pickups that you can make in the transfer portal is getting a star quarterback. Remember Joe Burrow with 2019 LSU? You know, he was a transfer portal pickup, and he proved to be one of the best transfer portal quarterbacks of all time. Same thing with Baker Mayfield. So I'm here to give you guys my list of 6 transfer portal quarterbacks this season that are going to have big impacts this year. We're going to start off with Aiden Childs, who followed Jonathan Smith from Oregon State to Michigan State. He was a 4-star recruit in the 2023 recruiting cycle. He was the second best transfer portal quarterback according to 24/7 Sports. And one thing about Aiden Childs is that he may be unproven, but if you just watch a little bit of his film from Oregon State spring game, you're going to be really amazed with just how great of a dual threat quarterback this dude is. I mean, he can make every single throw. He has a fantastic arm. He's really accurate throwing the ball outside of the pocket, and he's a really dynamic runner. He has one of those Jaden Daniels kind of running styles. You know, he's really sticky in the open field, really nimble, really quick on his feet. Aiden Childs also has really good size for somebody who hasn't played that much. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. So when you think about Michigan State and them having Jonathan Smith as their head coach and getting Aiden Childs in the transfer portal, it could be potentially one of those situations where you got a first-year head coach who hits the ground running immediately because he found the right guy at quarterback. Michigan State may not have the greatest team around them, but when you got a great quarterback, it can make up for some deficiencies that you may have. And the Big Ten isn't really that strong this year as people think. You know, outside of Oregon and, Ohio State, everybody else, you don't really know how good they're truly going to be. Some may say Penn State, but we don't really know about them. They have some new coordinators up there. We'll see how that'll go. They also have some problems at wide receiver, and Aiden Childs, if he ends up reaching his potential right out the gate under Jonathan Smith, he could be the best quarterback in the Big Ten immediately. Cameron Ward was one of the biggest transfer portal pickups that the Miami Hurricanes have ever had. Probably the biggest. The last biggest pickup they had was years ago when they got De'Aaron King, and then after him it was Jalen Phillips. But Cam Ward, as a Hurricane fan myself, I'm really happy that we have him underneath center this year. He's going to be the perfect fit in Shannon Dawson's offense. He already comes from an air raid style offense that he played in his last 2 years starting at Washington State. And this guy is a really good quarterback. And at one point, he was the most underrated quarterback in college football because initially he went unranked out of high school. And then he went to Incarnate World. He won the Jerry Rice Award, which is awarded to the most outstanding freshman of that season. And not only that, he threw like 40-plus touchdowns during one of his years at Incarnate World. So then he goes to Washington State, and he's a little bit under the radar because Washington State isn't really that much of a household name. So not a lot of people know about him. But this past season, he got a lot of attention because, he hit the portal and he was a fairly decent quarterback that people probably look him up and they see the stats and they're like, oh yeah, give me him. And it was really weird, the whole saga he had getting to Miami because initially, he's taking a visit to Miami. He's taking a visit to the Ops, Florida State. And then he's flirting with some other teams. And then he just decides to declare for the NFL draft, and then everybody's like, bro, what the hell are you doing declaring for the NFL draft, man? You better off coming back and playing another season of college ball and improving your draft stock. But then, out of nowhere, Mario Cristobal, being a great recruiter that he is, flips him from the draft to Miami. Now, they probably had to dish out a lot of money to get him, but Who cares? The Miami Hurricanes finally have a great quarterback. And that's the only thing that this team has been missing that's been keeping them from being able to compete for an ACC title. Like, the best season I've seen the Miami Hurricanes have, Malik Rozier was the starting quarterback when they won 10 games and lost to Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl. Imagine if you would have had a better quarterback on that team that season. That team possibly could have won the national championship with how good the defense was. The defense should be really good next season. The offensive line is going to be great. And the receivers, there's some slight concerns there, but there's a lot of upside at the receiver position for Miami. And then we know how stout they are at running back. So Cam Ward could finally be the missing piece that Miami has been looking for to finally get the U truly back in the national spotlight and people back talking about the U and people finally selling back out the games. Because the last time Miami was popping and people were paying attention, Hard Rock used to be rocking. And I remember when they beat Notre Dame and Virginia Tech during the stretch, when they were playing those two teams at home and you couldn't even hear anything. So Cam Ward was a huge pickup for the Miami Hurricanes. He's in the offense that he should be very familiar with a lot of playmakers around him. All he needs to do is stay healthy, do his thing, not get caught up with those strip clubs and the fine lights in Miami, and he should be a great pickup for the Hurricanes. He possibly could be a Heisman contender, depending on if the Hurricanes make it to the ACC championship or whatnot. But he easily, right now, to me, is the best quarterback in this conference right now. Dylan Gabriel was, at one point, a Heisman contender last season. Now, eventually, he started to fall off the radar. He dealt with some injuries. Oklahoma had a couple of setbacks, but he had 42 total touchdowns last season. And I was really surprised that he just opted transferred out of Oklahoma. Now, Jackson Darnold, I get the dude was highly touted coming out of high school, but he didn't look too hot in the Alamo Bowl. And the fact that he's going to Oregon with Will Stein being the offensive coordinator, who's one of the best OCs in college football, he's potentially going to be a head coach next year. Dylan Gabriel potentially could win the Heisman this year. Oregon has everything. They got great offensive linemen, receivers that are really good. Tess Johnson comes back. You picked up Evan Stewart out of the transfer portal. You set at running back. Dylan Gabriel right now is currently the best quarterback in the Big Ten. You're looking for a championship pedigree, transfer portal quarterback? Dylan Gabriel is that guy. KJ Jefferson is a really underrated quarterback that not a lot of people have been talking about. Now, initially, prior to last season, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC before he got ruined by their previous OC once Kendall Briles left. Now, he's going to UCF to go play for the Gus Bus. And the Gus Bus hasn't really had great quarterback play over his last couple of years coaching. Even his last few years at Auburn, the best QB play he was getting was Jarrett Stidham. And Jarrett Stidham wasn't bad, but he wasn't great neither. He was just pretty good. KJ Jefferson is one of those guys that has the potential to be a program-changing quarterback if Gus Malzahn knows what to do with him and you can utilize him properly. And the difference in KJ Jefferson's game between guys like John Rice Plumlee and quarterbacks Gus Malzahn has worked with in the past is that he's not just a great runner. He's a pretty good passer. He makes really good decisions with the football. He doesn't really have a high turnover number. Last season was the most interceptions that he ever threw in the year. But previously, he didn't throw more than 5 INTs. He's also pretty accurate with the ball. And he's really dynamic when he decides to tuck and run. And you look at that size that he has. He's like 245 pounds at 6'3". Nobody want to see that in the open field. And Gus Malzahn likes to run a lot of design quarterback runs. But if he can find a way to just get a little bit more out of KJ Jefferson as a passer, This could be the best quarterback that he's ever had, and he could be the difference in UCF being a 6-win team and maybe winning the Big 12 conference. Like, the Big 12 doesn't really have a lot of strong quarterbacks outside of Shadur Sanders and Quinn Ewers. KJ Jefferson, if he ends up being a great fit in Gus Malzahn's system, UCF is a really good dark horse pick to win the Big 12 this year. Brock Vandagriff was riding the bench the last couple of seasons that he was at Georgia. All right. And he was one of those guys that had a lot of hype coming out of high school. He was a 5-star recruit. And then he got to Georgia and you didn't really hear anything from him. Now, it's not like he didn't get any playing time because he wasn't good. It's just one of those situations where I feel the guys that were above him were just better than him. And maybe he just didn't get enough opportunities to show what he can do in practice. But Kentucky is a really good situation right now. And Kentucky, with the expanding college football playoffs now, is easily one of those teams that could sneak their way into that thing. Yeah, they may not consistently be a team that always is having 10-win seasons, but every 3-4 years, Mark Stoops pulls off a 10-win season. And if they can get good quarterback play out of Brock Vandagriff, they could easily be a contender in the SEC this year because they're going to have a really good defense. Their defensive line is going to be nasty next year. Their offensive line should be back to the standard that they always hold themselves to at that position. One of the best in college football. And they got really good receivers. They got 2 of the better receivers in the SEC. And we know how good they always are at running back. So Brock Vandagriff, if he can give them good, consistent quarterback play, at least better than what we got out of Devin Leary, Kentucky should be able to compete because they got a really talented roster that's going to have a lot of experience, a lot of returning production coming back. So Brock Vandagriff, if he can be one of those quarterbacks that ends up giving you 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, that could be good enough to get you into the SEC championship because you got it all, but just a great quarterback. Even Will Levis wasn't that good, and many people regard him to be the best quarterback that Kentucky has had in recent memory. So I don't think the standard is all too high. So Brock Vandagriff is a quarterback that not a lot of people are talking about. He was a 9th-ranked quarterback in the transfer portal. I think he's going to be really good. He has pretty good athleticism, a really good arm, and he can throw from a lot of different arm angles, and I think that he throws with pretty good touch. I like the way that the ball comes out of his hands when he throws it. Will Howard, he was the starter at Kansas State the last 2 years, and he got replaced for the younger quarterback that we had on they had on the roster, who was a true freshman. But it still didn't mean that Will Howard wasn't really good, and it wasn't like he was splitting reps with the guy. It was 50-50. Majority of the time, the only time that he sat out and got replaced was when they were doing design quarterback runs. Will Howard was probably the second or the third best quarterback in the Big 12. He reminds me a lot of Kyle Trask when he was at Florida, but with a little bit more mobility. Now, he's not somebody that's going to be a burner in the ground game for you, but he has enough athleticism where you can do some quarterback powers to the outside and you can pick up 5-6 yards. Like Chip Kelly can have a lot of fun with Will Howard. That's the offensive coordinator. And they already are stacked at wide receiver. The only thing they need to work on is beefing up the interior of their offensive line. I mean, other than that, Will Howard has everything necessary to put up Heisman numbers. If Will Howard isn't going for 40 touchdowns, and maybe 5 or 7 interceptions, completing 66 or higher percent of his passes, then this would be a really disappointing opportunity for him. This is a great team to help boost up your draft stock. This is a great team to help you get the Heisman Trophy. They're going to run the football with Quinshon Judkins and, Trevion Henderson or if he's even coming back. I think he's coming back. I don't know for certain, but there's enough for Will Howard to put up Heisman video game like numbers. So anything other but a Heisman campaign for Will Howard will be a disappointing season in my book. But this is it for my 6 biggest impact quarterback transfers for this offseason, or my biggest impact quarterback transfer report. My biggest impact quarterback transfers for this upcoming college football season. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section down below.